Good day, everyone, especially to Professor Ofishar. I am Jessame Juaban, and for the continuation of the historical perspective of the Philippine educational system, I will be discussing the Education Act of 1982, Executive Order 117, RA 7722, and RA 7796. So first is the Education Act of 1982 or Batas Pambansa bilang 232, signed into law by the late President Ferdinand Marcos on September 11, 1982. This was an act providing for the establishment and maintenance of an integrated system of education and one of the legal bases for education in the Philippines. In Section 2, this act shall apply to and govern both formal and non-formal systems in public and private schools at all levels of the educational system. Section 3 declares these national development goals of the Philippine educational system. These goals fundamentally tell us that these goals embolden the educational system in the Philippines. So allow me to read the national development goals. So first is to achieve and maintain an accelerating rate of economic development and social progress. Second, to assure the maximum participation of all the people in the attainment and enjoyment of the benefits of such growth, and to achieve and strengthen national unity and consciousness and preserve, develop, and promote desirable cultural, moral, and spiritual values in changing world. Section 3 also tells us that it is the state's obligation to ensure equal access to quality education for all, regardless of sex, age, creed, socioeconomic status, physical and mental conditions, racial or ethnic origin, and political or other affiliation. Whatever their differences, individuals can benefit from quality education and the ability to promote and develop themselves within their culture, traditions, interests, beliefs, and education as an instrument for their maximum participation in national development. Looking at Section 4, the Declaration of Objectives, stating that all educational institutions, whether it is public or private, shall aim to inculcate the love of country, teach the duties of citizenship, and develop moral character, personal discipline, and scientific, technological, and vocational efficiency. The educational system shall reach out to educationally deprived communities to give meaningful reality to their membership in the national society, enrich their civic participation in the community and national life, and unify all Filipinos into a free and just nation. So moving on to the educational community, Chapter 1, Preliminary Provisions. In Section 5, the Declaration of Policy and Objectives. So in order to truly achieve the objectives of education by the state, the government policy should be fostered with a spirit of shared purposes and cooperation among the members and elements of the educational community and between the community and other sectors of the society. In connection to that, these are the focuses of this act: the parents, students, school personnel, and the institution. Moreover, the state shall aid and support the natural right and duty of parents, to promote and safeguard the welfare and interest of the students, to promote the social economic status of all school personnel, and lastly, to extend support to promote the viability of those institutions. So these are the members and elements of the educational community. These are the parents, students, school personnel, and also the school. So, in Chapter 2, we will be talking about the rights of the educational community. For Section 8, these are the rights of the parents. The parents are given the privilege to contribute to the betterment of the school community. They are also encouraged to cooperate with the teachers in the implementation of school programs. They are also given the right to access any official record directly relating to their children. This includes the grades and performance of their children. In Section 9, the rights of students in school, these are the following rights and privileges a student can acquire from this act. So these rights denote that students deserve a quality education and other related services. Students also have the right to their own records, to know and to retrieve them. And finally, the students have the right to handle themselves accordingly and to form necessary groups that could equip them with academic achievement. So in Section 10 also gives the rights to the persons working for an educational institution like teachers, school administrators, academic non-teaching personnel, and non-academic personnel. So these are the general rights listed in 4 major points, and following that is the special right and or privileges of teaching and academic staff to complement the previous rights. May we all be reminded that teachers have their own lives apart from being teachers, and they also deserve the rightful treatment and correct salary for their service and commitment. So teachers are given the right to decline whatever task that is not related to their duty. So at the special rights of school administrators, in which they have deemed persons in authority and must be respected as they do their roles correctly. Another is the special rights of school administrators. So school administrators must also be treated with respect and protection as they do their duties, and they must be given sufficient administrative discretion for them to effectively perform their duties for the school. And lastly, the rights of schools. So schools are given the right to provide a proper governance of the school, to adopt and enforce administrative or management systems. The school also are given the right to appoint or hire someone to teach on who can be admitted to their school and what are the subjects or curriculum they will study. So let's proceed to the chapter 3, the duties and obligations of the school community. So first are the parents. So the following listed are the duties of parents, and parents are expected to be responsible and accountable for the education of their children. Parents must be cooperative and should take part in every program that could help and benefit either curricular or co-curricular. Next are the duties and responsibilities of the students. So students are expected to develop their potential for service within their families and community. They must continue to undergo an education suited to their abilities so that they can function effectively for themselves and for the community around them. Also, they must uphold academic integrity, they must endeavor academic excellence, and must abide by the rules and regulations as they fulfill their academic duties. Students must maintain peace and tranquility. They should observe rules, they should be disciplined, and must be observant of the public welfare and rights of others by participating civic affairs and activities that promote the general welfare. Moving on to the teacher's obligation, so primarily the teachers must perform their duty in accordance with the school's philosophy, goals, and objectives. Most importantly, teachers must be responsible and accountable for their obligations as a teacher and to their profession, to what they can do, what they can offer, what they can foster, and to what they can contribute to the school and to their community. And lastly, the school's administrators' obligations. So, school administrators must maintain professional behavior in his work. School administrators must also provide adequate reports to the teachers, to the other staffs in their school on what are the status of their actual performance. School administrator must observe due process, fairness, promptness, privacy, constructiveness, and consistency in disciplining his/her teachers and other personnels. They must also maintain adequate records and submit required reports to the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports, that is now called CHED and DepEd. So moving on to the third part of the Act, the Educational Systems, Chapter 1, Formal Education. So, formal education by definition refers to the structured and chronologically graded learnings organized and provided by the formal school system, and for which certification is required in order for the learner to progress through the grades or move to higher levels. So, formal education shall correspond to the following levels. So, we have the elementary education, which is the first stage of compulsory formal education, primarily concerned with providing basic education and usually corresponding to 6 or 7 grades, including the preschool programs. Second is the secondary education, or which we call the high school, no, and it is the state of formal education following the elementary level, concerned primarily with continuing basic education and expanding it to include the learning of employable gainful skills, usually corresponding to 4 years of high school or junior high school. And tertiary education, lastly, morning kaning college, is the post-secondary schooling, which is the higher education leading to a degree in a specific profession or discipline. So the state recognizes that formal education or the school system is the society's primary learning system and therefore the main instrument for the achievement of the country's educational goals and objectives. For the Chapter 2, we also have the non-formal education and specialized educational services. So, one of the objectives of non-formal education, which is now called the Alternative Learning System or ALS, is to eradicate illiteracy and raise the level of functional literacy of the population. So, we have these specialized educational services, which the state further recognizes its responsibility to provide, within the context of the formal education system, services to meet the special needs of certain clientele. So, these are the specific types which shall be guided by the basic policies of the state embodied in the general provisions of this act, which is first the work education or practical arts. It is a program of basic education which aims to develop the right attitudes towards work and technical vocational education, post-secondary but non-degree programs leading to 1 or 2 or 3 year certificates in preparation for a group of middle-level occupations. So one of the courses offered in TechVoc for women, we have bartending, food processing, plumbing, automotive servicing, cookery, and dressmaking. And for the men, we have agri-fishery arts, we have home economics, we have information and communications technology, and industrial arts. There are also courses related to carpentry. There are also courses related to electrical installations and maintenance, and there are much more. So let's proceed to the special education. It is the education of persons who are physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, or culturally different from the so-called normal individuals, that they require modification or school practices or services to develop them to their maximum capacity. And lastly, the non-formal education. Any organization, school-based educational activities undertaken by the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports and other agencies aimed at attaining specific learning objectives for a particular clientele, especially the illiterates and the out-of-school youth and adults. So, they have their objectives of non-formal education. So first is to eradicate illiteracy and raise the level of functional literacy of the population. Second, objectives is to provide unemployed and underemployed youth and adults with appropriate vocational technical skills to enable them to become more productive and effective citizens, and lastly, to develop among the clientele of non-formal education proper values and attitudes necessary for personal, community, and national development. Moving on to the Chapter 3, Section 27, the recognition of schools. So, operations of schools shall be subject to their prior authorization of the government and shall be affected by recognition, which means that in order for the school or an institution to operate, it must be recognized and authorized by the state. Also, in other cases, the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports defines who is qualified to apply, providing for a permit system and other matters. Another for the Section 29, the voluntary accreditation. So the ministry shall encourage programs of voluntary accreditation for institutions which desire to meet standards of quality over and above the minimum required for state recognition. So the use of accreditation, so it helps to determine if an institution meets or exceeds the minimum quality standards. So of course, the state must ensure that the institution that are operating must deliver the quality standards of education that the states want to deliver to the Filipinos. So let's move on to another chapter, the chapter for the internal organization of schools. So each school shall establish such internal organization as it will best enable to carry out its academic and administrative functions, subject to limitations provided by law. And each school shall establish such arrangements for the peaceful settlement of disputes between or among the members of the educational community. Another thing or what's good about the school organization or internal organization in school is that it provides the betterment of the society. Though it is not perfect, but internal organization tries its best to solve the problems or dispute within the educational community. Another thing that internal organization helps promote practical values, the culture of the community, and also it encourages people or the students to be a better person, to be a better individual within his or her community, because it encourages them to be united or to connect to their peers, to the other students, according to their interest and ability. So for Chapter 5, the School Finance and Assistance, so it is hereby declared to be the policy of the state that the national government shall contribute to the financial support of educational programs pursuant to the goals of education as declared by the Constitution. Towards this end, the government shall adopt measures to broaden access to education through financial assistance and other forms of incentives to school, teachers, fiscal, and students, and to encourage and stimulate private support to education through fiscal and other assistance measures. So as you can see, we have the funding of public schools, we have the national funds, financial aid assistance to public secondary schools, share of local government, the special education fund, tuition and other school fees, income from other sources. We also have funding of private schools. So funding of private schools, the government assistance, tuition and other fees, income from other sources, and the institutional funds. So the government, in recognition of their complementary role in the educational system, they may provide aid to the programs of private schools in the form of grants or scholarships or loans from government financial institutions. And moving on to the incentives to education. So the declaration of policy, it is the policy of the state in the pursuit of its national educational development goals to provide an incentive program to encourage the participation of the community in the development of the educational sector. And lastly, the assistance to students. So the government shall provide financial assistance to financially disadvantaged and deserving students. Such assistance may be in the form of state scholarships, grants in aid, assistance from the Educational Loan Fund, or subsidized tuition rates in the state colleges and universities.